Good morning, good afternoon, good night to everybody. Or do you say good night when you say goodbye? No, good night. My name is Rainer Bartel. I'm with SBS. We are happy to introduce, or not to introduce, to introduce again Semperis. We did one before. And if our agenda will be this morning, can you switch, Rob, can you switch to the next page? And our agenda will be this morning, I will give you a brief introduction to SBS, just very brief, because the main point is the Semperis solutions. And Rob Ingenthron, he's a senior engineer at Semperis, will talk about their solutions, which and what is in the pipeline, etc. And when we still have time, we will Rob will demonstrate the DSP or the RDFR. He will explain what it is. And then we have also, when we still have time, we have a Q&A. So what I would like here to some housekeeping first. This call is recorded for those who couldn't join, that we can send them the recording. And when you have to leave earlier, we send to everybody the recording. And when you have any questions, you can put it in the Q&A or chat. I will monitor both. And at the end, when we have time, Rob will answer the questions. If we don't have the time anymore, we will take your the questions and I will make sure that you get the answers emailed afterwards. So with that, I would like to go to the first point, which is introduction of SBS. And as I said, I make it fast. We are founded in Rockville, Maryland. We are over 80 employees. 91 we founded Rockville. We are a Semperis partner. We have several practices. I'm from the GRC and cybersecurity practice, which in my mind, of course, because I'm from there, it's the most important one. But we have also AI and automation and cloud and infrastructure and the special one, learning and management. Meaning we administrate and monitor large learning systems for large customers like HP, for example. We have over 65 engineers for pre and post sales for various solutions, including at Semperis. And we have also developed an own tool, several, but one I want to mention because it's connected to AD. We have a tool which is called My ID, which lets you administer and maintain your ID and passwords for Active Directory and Enter ID also. And I have a link here. I will send you the slide deck later as well. A link here which lets you connect you to our data sheet for that in case you are interested. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Rob to start the session from Semperis. Rob, can you take it over and I go on mute then?
Yes, sir. Thanks for the intro and welcome to the webinar. My name is Rob Ingenthron. I've been with Semperis for over 2 years now, and I'm a senior solution engineer for the partner channel side. I started out on the enterprise side, and I'm going to talk about all of our products, but primarily our flagships, our so-called flagship stuff. And I'll get to that. This is a slide-heavy deck, but I'm going to be skipping a lot of the slides in the beginning part to get to the actual product discussion. This is more of a generalized deck.
Rob, you still show the SBS slide.
Yeah, no, I know. I just was talking to that first.
Just want to make sure.
Starting out here, like I said, I'm gonna skip some of the stuff. I'm assuming most people on the call probably know what AD is, what Entra ID is, etc., and understand how these fit in to the needs of our companies and organizations in terms of how AD is impacted. And actually, your My ID product actually fits into one of the touch points I have with Active Directory, which is in terms of securing it, which is to store credentials securely and make sure that you have access to those in the event of a disaster. Some companies don't really think about that aspect of recovery of other areas like the Entra ID passwords and whatnot. But generally speaking, AD is a vital piece of infrastructure. Most organizations over 500 users are using Active Directory. and it's the one that's usually hit. And there's lots of use cases for AD issues caused by cyber attacks, for example. They typically involve credential abuse. That's where I keep seeing issues when I do security assessments with companies. And we have one of our products called Purple Knight, which I'll touch on later, that works in that regard and helps companies find potential vulnerabilities in Active Directory and uncovering those, being able to mitigate those more easily rather than hunting around randomly for issues in Active Directory. And a lot of companies don't have any kind of rollback capability. If something bad happens, most companies don't have a rollback to undo things, undo changes to AD, and then of course a full force recovery, something that goes beyond just a simple backup and recovery solution, where they can, in an orchestrated fashion, quickly recover the whole Active Directory service within their environment. So those are key points. And as I was saying, usually when I do these sorts of webinars, we talk about AD more generally and things that you need to address with Active Directory. One of them being deterring lateral movement, and local rights, and having your passwords actually well documented, but in a secure fashion. In addition to that, all the other things I mentioned, password policies and account policies and tiering and all that kind of stuff. But there's questions that we ask customers to sort of lead into our product suite to cover the areas where they have huge gaps, often huge gaps. It may be on the auditing side, seeing what's happening with Active Directory, or the visibility of issues, like what kind of tools do they have. Usually, a lot of companies will have a more generic tool that covers a broad area of things, but doesn't focus specifically on Active Directory necessarily. And what, how they can visualize those changes. There are tools that give you the changes in AD, but sometimes they're not very easy to utilize for discovery or doing reporting and whatnot. So all those things can add up to a slower ability to respond, or an inability to respond for that matter. And you really need, and if you categorized it, you really need real-time change monitoring, and an undo capability is really critical for your mean time to recovery. That's a metric or phrase that a lot of high-level, C-level execs are looking for. What's the mean time to recovery from some incident? And specific to AD, because it covers a broad area with a lot of stuff connected to it, including the cloud ultimately, what your ability, whatever ability you have to look at things and be able to undo those changes is very important. Getting indicators and alerting to be more proactive, and what kind of notifications that you get, and what is it looking at in terms of Active Directory. And then, as I mentioned, full force recovery is really a vital piece that a lot of companies just take a chance with. They hope that this thing never happens. Um, just briefly, I wanted to talk about the difference. We hear about in our organization EDR a lot, and compared to ITDR, which is a relatively new space defined by Gartner, where our company fits in. On the EDR side, you're typically looking at the endpoints and looking for stuff happening on the endpoints. Whereas with ITDR, you're looking more specifically at Active Directory. So if somebody, a bad actor, is doing different types of attacks, which I've listed here on the left side, they're going to probably hit some endpoint, but it's going to move into reconnaissance and eventually propagation throughout Active Directory. Active Directory enables a lot of lateral capability because those accounts are shared across many systems in the environment. And a lot of companies, the last couple I worked at, didn't necessarily have great policies where they managed what accounts get added to endpoints, giving potentially hundreds of people access to for example, every laptop in the company. So those kinds of considerations are very important. And as I mentioned, we tie into Azure typically. Customers are typically tying into Azure, and that leads to escalation paths to the entry tenant. And then these days, more prevalent is the data extortion that's happening. Data gets compromised, AD gets compromised, they get access to other systems, and you're losing data and having to pay some bad actors. Um, As far as the ability to recover, this is an older survey that was done. Um, a lot of companies, as you can see here, it really hasn't changed a lot. Haven't they have a lot of companies have not really gone through the process of seeing how to recover, testing their recovery, or even planning it. These numbers haven't changed a lot. When I do sessions with customers, first time calls, typically they have backups, but they don't really have a planned recovery for Active Directory, which is more complicated. And um, I'll get into that in a second about the Forest Recovery Guide. But that's an important piece, is talking about the Forest Recovery Guide. And again, the leveraging of issues with Active Directory lead to these kind of problems. When you're looking at the Forest Recovery Guide, this is when, for example, you're planning for some sort of catastrophic cyber disaster. It could be an incident that was caused internally, it could be corruption, it could be a ransomware attack, whatever the case may be, as well as setting up a really a proper a lab environment for Active Directory requires usually taking a backup and recovering that in an isolated environment. And you still have to do these same steps to get a properly working lab if you're using production data. The problem is this guide has a lot of steps. This guide's buried within a nearly 4,000 page document. The total of this is about 44 pages. It's hyperlinked, or you can download this PDF, but it's a high level guide. It's not a detailed recovery plan. And this isn't a recovery plan, obviously, that's customized for anybody. So the first thing Microsoft says is devise your forest recovery plan. And again, a lot of companies haven't done this. So it's not their guide, even when they get here. They have to figure out how this fits in to their environment and map it out for their infrastructure. So it's very important to definitely look at that guide. If you summarized it, and this is where we talk about how our solution complements backup solutions, typical or traditional backup solutions. Typical backup solutions can do the first couple of steps. And if you have a multi-domain environment, like say 3 domains in a forest, right? If you want to recover that in a lab, as an example, you need to recover 1 DC per domain, and it's a singular process. It's a linear process starting with each one of those DCs recovering, which is these first couple of steps. And then you have to do all the other stuff, which includes metadata cleanup. Metadata cleanup can be considerable in a large environment. The last place I worked at had hundreds of domain controllers, and setting up a lab by myself, it took me about a week just to do metadata cleanup in my spare time, all my other activities. But even if I was doing that in an emergency, it's still going to be hours to go through the tedious process of doing the cleanup before I can even proceed to the next steps. A lot of this is cleanup before you move on, getting things ready, doing all the steps that are mandated by Microsoft to have a clean environment recovery. So this is a lot of stuff. I'm not going to go into the details of all the steps, but hopefully you get the picture that it's more than just recovering a backup. It's a lot of other stuff. And this is what our solution fully automates and orchestrates. And again, I'll get into that in a minute. The main point is that a lot of companies don't have this capability. And the other one I want to talk about is Entra DR. We like to do discovery with companies and ask them, what kind of a plan do you have? Do you understand how Microsoft defines your responsibilities? And a lot of companies do understand to a point what responsibilities are out there. But it seems like when we talk to customers where administrators have inherited existing infrastructure, they don't really fully have a plan for how to recover data. What happens if something happens to your Azure side? And what happens if you've got an actual attack? The question that typically comes up with people who have experienced it is, what happens if I have hard deleted users? What if my admin accounts are hard deleted? What can you do then? Because the recycle bin doesn't work at that point. So the shared responsibility is that no matter what level of integration you have or what level of usage you have, you own the accounts and identities. You have to manage those. Microsoft manages the back end pieces, but if you have some problem, a bad actor, somebody comes in and deletes everything by accident or on purpose, you're responsible for all that data in the cloud. They don't have any solution for that. So that's a critical point that obviously for if you have a lot of stuff tied into the cloud, that's going to be a critical factor in the recovery. So the key takeaways are we're talking about zero trust, and AD is the foundation of that. AD has a lot of stuff tied into it. AD being attacked typically leads to exposure of the cloud, having issues in the cloud as well. Accounts and other things can be done to cause denial of service, for example. And bad actors are becoming adept at evading things, and security logs are not the only thing that should be used. And that's where, when I'm talking about our solutions, we differentiate ourselves because we don't just use security logs for tracking what's happening to Active Directory, and the continuous scanning giving you an idea of what's happening with vulnerability or the attack surface of Active Directory. And then, of course, ADFR, our force recovery solution, preparing you for the worst and your ability to recover. So our product suite is listed here. There's actually some other stuff that's in the works, but primarily speaking, we've got Directory Services Protector, which is tied into Active Directory, looking for what's changing in the environment based on the replication stream. And that's one of the unique differentiators of this product that I'll get into more detail about. Active Directory Forest Recovery is an orchestrated forest recovery solution that fully automates the Active Directory recovery process. We also have Entra ID covered with disaster recovery for Entra tenant, excuse me, which gives you a granular capability, or in bulk being able to recover things like users and groups and directory roles, applications, what they call applications, stuff like that. We can do granular and bulk recovery of that data. Purple Knight is a free assessment tool, which is also brandable, and it gives you a analysis of Active Directory's attack surface based on over 100, I think it's 144 indicators. And Forest Druid is also a free product, a free tool that you can use, which is also brandable. And it does a graphical view and a text-based view of relationships between accounts and certain privileges. So it gives you a sort of a mapping of things where you can more quickly visualize potential attack paths in Active Directory. And it makes sure for the customer that they're acknowledging awareness of different paths to things, which might be via nested groups, for example. And then we have this product coming out at the end of June. That's what the target date is. Migrator for Active Directory. This is one of the newest kind of directory migration tools that's been released in many, many years. And we also, when paired with DSP, talk about the ability to recover changes very quickly. So if you're doing a migration and you discover a problem, paired with DSP, that'll give you a very rapid ability to recover things if you discover something didn't work or something wasn't moved properly. And it facilitates other features as well. Something people like to hear about if they're in the situation is gal sync, for example. When you have two separate directories and you want people to email each other via the directory, but you don't want to share or trust that other directory, you can do things like gal sync, which gives you the ability to email people in another region or isolated environment or whatever the case may be. So let's talk about the products. We have a layered approach to security, cybersecurity, and in terms of our product suite, we cover what we use this wheel to talk about the before, during, and after. We use the word attack a lot, but I change it to incident where I can, and kind of go back and forth because I have worked in the operations side as much as security. And I find that in the companies I've been at, we've had a lot of incidents where people did something accidentally, or they were writing a script to make some work easier, but they didn't fully test it properly, or some unanticipated thing happened, or somebody accidentally deleted a AD integrated DNS zone and brought down the whole company. So stuff like that happens, as well as malicious activity. So how do you see that? What visualization capability do you have? So this is where our product suite is at a high level is fitting in. So we've got DSP, Directory Services Protector, looking at the real-time change auditing. It's looking at indicators, or it offers indicators. It has notification roles where you can be more proactive and set baselines for things in your environment. And those notification roles have an undo capability, so you can actually revert certain types of changes without sitting at a console and seeing those changes happen. Purple Knight, again, is a free tool. It has a bunch of IOEs, a bunch of IOCs that you can analyze AD with, and Forest Druid fits into this picture as well. Pardon me for coughing. My throat is really messed up. So on the during side, this is also a place where you want to have some kind of tooling available. And again, a lot of customers don't have this capability. I've worked at a couple of companies that don't have any real capability or didn't have any real capability to see changes in AD other than just using logs everywhere, security event logs everywhere. So DSP facilitates an ability, like I said, to undo, and you've got Forest Druid to do analysis with as well. And then on the after side, we've got Active Directory force recovery and disaster recovery for intratenant. So if something does happen, we've got those two. And Active Directory force recovery also includes a special version of Purple Knight called Purple Knight Post Breach, which gives you an ability to do some analysis after the forest has been recovered. You can use ADFR, and we use ADFR for post breach response to analyze things that have changed in AD, for example, to look for activity that has occurred based on the data that we've collected. So it's a very powerful product. And talking more specifically about DSP and ADFR, on the DSP side, you're getting a continuous vulnerability assessment. It has change tracking built in, but the change tracking is not based on event logs. It's based on what's actually getting replicated. And that's a unique differentiator for us. So there's a lot of solutions. The majority of solutions out there use event log based tracking. So you enable policies and use security event logs, and you have to look at every DC because changes are unique per domain controller in that sort of a scenario, pulling that log data. The problem with that is at scale, it gets worse and worse to manage. So if I've got two DCs, it's not that big of a deal. It's pretty easy for me to make sure I'm collecting data accurately from each one. But if I've got 20 or 30 or 50 or 200 domain controllers, that is a lot of overhead as things scale up to keep track of, to make sure they're really giving me the log data I'm assuming is there. So it's a very important differentiator. And then the ability to have the alerts, the notification rules, which I mentioned, the auto remediation, where the rules have the ability to undo certain types of changes. And we have reporting capability. There's out of the box a bunch of templates. We have a compliance report package that's free, and it adds another bunch of reports. It brings it up to like 84 or 100 templates in total. And we can customize those with the report authoring tool that's included. And on the ADFR side, force recovery, this, based on the technology, which I'll get into in a minute, it provides a clean, malware-free restoration. It's very fast. It's AD specific. It's not restoring, or it's not backing up in the first place, the operating system. So it's not restoring the operating system data. It's just backing up and restoring the Active Directory service. So you get a rapid recovery. The automation is all built in, and you can recover to any hardware platform, which is another huge advantage for flexibility on the recovery side. So it's got quite a few advantages. And then Purple Knight, which I mentioned in a little more detail here, lots of downloads. It's a award-winning tool. It's got a lot of indicators. These indicators are updated throughout the year, so it's not a stagnant tool. It wasn't just released and then occasionally updated. We add new updates for the indicators pretty regularly throughout the year. And it really helps reduce the attack surface. It's a pretty tremendous tool for free to be able to analyze AD. And like I said, it's brandable. So it's a pretty huge benefit. I'm going to skip through some of these other slides, but talking about the tier 0 perimeter, this is what Forest Druid looks like. And it enables an ability to search for certain assets. And you can change the tiering in terms of how these are mapped. So you can create different tiers. By default, there's a tier 0. Everything's considered risky, or it's known tier 0, like enterprise admins, for example. But you can classify different tiers in here and organize this in a way where it helps you visualize what's out there, and you can acknowledge the sort of what I would call the connectivity to different objects, which could potentially, in certain cases, be a really high risk that you might not be aware of. There's especially companies that are older that haven't analyzed nested groups and such. There's quite a bit of um, uh, extra stuff, junk, things that have been added since the year 2000 or whenever AD was deployed. On the DSP side, in a little more detail, again, tamper-proof tracking, we'd use that term because we're looking at the replication stream. It's a continuous vulnerability assessment. And I already talked about this other stuff here. But it extends also into the Entra tenant. So on the Entra side, we also add indicators for that. It ties into the same console. And you can, in certain cases, undo certain types of changes there as well. So you get tracking and a rollback capability, which gives you a hybrid view of Active Directory and your Entra tenant, which is really helpful for, especially large organizations. The other thing that we've recently added is something which we call the Identity Runtime Protection, IRP. This is adding some additional types of indicators which can indicate certain types of attacks happening against Active Directory. So in addition to the stuff that we come with out of the box, we've got these IRP indicators, which are more machine learning oriented, and it's doing an analysis of different types of activities to give you insights into potential problems like password spray attacks, brute force attacks, things like that. All the stuff listed here to give you more insight again into what might be happening against your Active Directory, which could be malicious activity. So again, this is a pretty broad broad list of capabilities as far as uh, um, analyzing what's happening in Active Directory. On the forest recovery side, and again, I'm skipping a lot of slides here. I mentioned already we've got the clean restore, rapid recovery. It's automation in terms of that whole forest recovery guide. I don't have to know anything about that recovery guide. This does everything in that guide for me in an automated fashion. So, as opposed to having a disaster and needing to get or hire technical expertise, I could add this to my environment and fully orchestrate an AD recovery without that technical expertise. But in addition to that, Semperis provides support for this product in that if you have a disaster, if a customer has a disaster, we will get on the phone with them. We actually asked the customer to give us a call to include us in the recovery process. We make sure that this product is working and doing the recovery as expected. So in addition to the tooling, you get really advanced support and experience on a call, helping you hand in hand with a recovery. And then that includes post forensic or post attack forensics. The technology, to break it down a little more on the ADFR side, instead of backing up the operating system, excuse me, we're just backing up the service. And that's why our backups are significantly smaller and can be done more frequently throughout the day or week or whatever the allotted time period is for this particular solution. Compared to regular backups, which are significantly larger, even with deduplication, you're backing up everything. So if malware has been resident for a couple of 100 days or some bad software, we're not going to recover that. We're just recovering AD. So you could spin up clean boxes, gold from a gold image, and fully recover Active Directory in an orchestrated fashion with about 5 or 6 clicks. So very easy recovery, as well as quarantining sysvol, which is an important capability as well. And the other thing about ADFR is it's totally separate from the Active Directory forest. It's not tied into any of these forests that it's protecting. It's in a work group mode, or it could be in a red forest, which is the design where you have a super isolated Active Directory with limited access and use that as sort of the administrative account holder and then getting to all this other stuff. Some people put ADFR in an environment like that, but typically it's just a workstation. So it's less vulnerable to lateral attack because if, for example, Forest A is compromised, there's no accounts related to ADFR. So you're not going to get lateral access from Forest A to the ADFR server. So you get an additional layer of protection. And it's very portable data as well. It's very easy to take that production data, spin up a new ADFR server in the lab, for example, and have an exact copy of your data on a subset of domain controllers. If I had 50 DCs in production, I could just spin up 2 in my lab, and ADFR does all the cleanup work related to that, which is a huge time saver. And then Dret, disaster recovery for intra-tenant. This is a SaaS-based product. It greatly simplifies disaster recovery for the tenant. It adds an ability to even recover hard deleted objects, which is tremendous. If you ever looked at how much stuff is in most companies' clouds, there's a lot of data there that you'd have to recreate somehow. And you do sync some from on-prem, but if you're already using those accounts in the cloud, there's other factors around that, like memberships of things, roles, and all that other stuff, application permissions. We can recover that. Whereas if you were going to do that manually, you'd have to manually go through and recreate all the interconnections and all the pieces of that for the user objects and group objects and whatnot. And we can also do a bulk recovery. You can just basically check all the things you want to recover and click restore, and it just goes and does its thing. It's really easy to implement, very easy to utilize. And then I mentioned the migration tool. I won't spend a lot of time on this. This is coming out in June, the end of June, but it gives you a lot of capabilities around migrating in Active Directory, related to Active Directory. And this slide's included, so you can refer back to that in the deck or the recording. And I'm trying to skip ahead to get to the good stuff. The other thing I want to mention before I move on is I have a lot of citable references and stuff, but I want to mention this. I'm going to skip all that. We have the HIP conference, the Hybrid Identity Protection Conference. This is one of the premier conferences around hybrid identity. And this year, I believe it's November, and it's in New Orleans. And there's a huge number of speakers, and this is all technical. It's not a sales conference. So again, just talking about our expertise in the area, plus the expertise we try to bring together for other organizations to meet up and network and get more information about hybrid identity. We have some great speakers. I don't have the list off the top of my head, but there's some great. I was there a few years ago as a customer, and it's a great conference. No sales talk unless you ask somebody about something. It's really technical, diving into different areas. So ask your sales rep on our side, Ben, or whoever you're working with, about this conference. It's very educational. It's a really valuable thing, and also you can earn CPE credits as well. So I definitely recommend checking that out. So again, I'm going to skip the salesy stuff. This is the Q&A piece, but I'm going to I want to move out of here. I'm going to end my slide deck here for a second because I wanted to show a couple of things that I was talking about. I guess this is a good time if somebody has questions, Rainier, to go ahead and ask them.
Yes, I don't have further questions. Those which we got, I had answered already.
Okay.
So go ahead. Maybe let me just, before you start with the demo, because the demo will go to the very end, let me just say, first of all, comprehensive, the way I like it, comprehensive presentation. And you guys, when I mean the clients, when you want to have a demonstration later on, more deeper going, we have clients all over the world, so that doesn't matter where you're from, we will facilitate that. And also with the Purple Knight, if you don't want to do it on your own, our guys can do that as well for you, and you get the results. So that's all I wanted to say. Rob, the rest of the is yours.
Yeah, and my task
thanks everybody.
As my task on the partner channel side, I'm the technical guy, so I can do technical enablement, training, whatever you want to call that, or however you want to term learning about our products. I can do sessions for that. We can do more in-depth sessions for DSP or DRET or ADFR, whatever you may want. Purple Knight, I can go into more detail about how to leverage that and use that for customers to maybe be like a foot in the door to lead to other products like DSP. And I'll be really brief here because I know we're coming up on the end of my time. But this is a look at Directory Services Protector. Mine's tied into Azure, my Azure tenant as well. I have a test tenant. I haven't made any changes recently, but you can see here you have a nice dashboard, an overall grade in terms of the security posture. You can actually dump out a report, which gives you this assessment, which is very Purple Knight looking, because this is where Purple Knight came from. So you get the same thing, the grades, all the indicators, and all the data that you would expect related to these indicators. So if I want to dive into something, I can see the data, what this is, as well as whatever triggered this. So it's very easy to navigate here in the HTML version, get more information about the indicators. You can dive into these and really help um, set this up as a sort of a service leading to more services, especially if you're doing things like helping customers clean up AD, for example, if you guys ever are doing something related to that. But again, this is a informative product, and it gives you actual actionable data as far as the results. Um, it's also, like I said, doing a security assessment continually, but these indicators are getting updated fairly frequently. So DSP gets updates about monthly now. So throughout the year, there's one or two new indicators added. There's some indicators updated. Sometimes there's indicators deprecated. The main point being it's not a stagnant product development. We have a dedicated research team that's pushing these things out. And when needed, they can be released on a fairly rapid basis. Like I have a couple of examples, like Print Spooler, which is related to Print Nightmare. Within about 2 days of the publication of that issue, which was very serious, we released an indicator for all of our customers. So they had something within about 2 days, but a little over 2 days, it was available to them. It's very easy to manage these. You can trigger these at any time. You can rerun these. You can do cleanup and rerun these indicators whenever you want and reassess things in near real time based on mitigation work you might be performing. And then I can see the changes in AD. So I can see the activity coming into my Active Directory. And I'm logged in also. This facilitates least privilege, which is another thing on that to-do list of what you should do to make AD more secure. I'm logged in with a tier 2 admin, meaning in AD, I have no permissions. I'm just a regular user. It's just an alternative admin account. In here, though, I have the ability to do something like revert changes in Active Directory. So I can actually undo this group membership change that occurred to special lab admins, which is a group in my lab, and the users were removed, and I just re-added them back. Even though I'm not a privileged admin in AD, I have the ability to do things like, say somebody removes all the domain admins, I can restore them back very easily. So it's just point and click. It's very easy to search. I can search across all of the data partitions in AD. So somebody could do something like change AD sites and services. Sites and services spans the entire environment. If somebody made a change like this replication change, I would have to be a more privileged administrator to be able to undo this in the console. Here, when somebody changed this old value from 10 to 555, which is a lot longer for a site link cost, or a lot higher for a site link cost, I mean, I can undo that. I don't need to navigate in the tool. I don't have to have special permissions other than in here. So I can undo that very easily. So it gives me a lot of capability to recover accidental or on purpose changes. And I have the ability to look at my enter tenant. Now, I haven't made any changes for a long time, so I don't know what's going to show up here, but I get a visualization of objects. You can see here role management changes I made. And certain types of changes are going to have an undo change capability. So you also get that same level of recovery here in DSP to undo things within the console or create rules. I get visualization specifically into DNS. So this is a really nice capability. If I've got changes happening in my DNS environment, whether it's forward zone or reverse zone, whatever the case may be, I can see what's going on here. And again, if I wanted to, I could recover those changes. I can see the data by highlighting this or doing a compare, and I can see specifically what got modified. And if I need to revert that back, it's very easy to undo the changes. And here is one of the coolest features that I liked from the company I was at. We had over 1,000 GPOs. And if you made changes to those, or somebody made changes and didn't follow a process, for example, going through change control, so anybody knew that they were making a change, they could bring down hundreds or thousands of users on a site. If somebody did something like that here and they changed a policy, this product allows me to easily visualize what those changes were. I can see the before and the after from when it was working to when it's not. And with this great visibility, I could decide, maybe I'll just go in and edit the policy and fix whatever it is, or maybe it's a bunch of changes and I can't. I don't want to go through the time with my users unable to do work. I could just go back to the working one, click restore, and quickly restore this policy back to a previous state. So it's looking at each time this policy changed in Active Directory, which is a very, very powerful feature. The capability to recover here is tremendous. It would save many companies, many hours of pain and frustration. The rules, and I know, again, I'm running out of time, so I'm trying to go kind of quick here, but the rules, this allows you to set baselines for things, including protecting objects. If I removed all my enterprise admins, in this case, this rule is very easy to define here. I added some criteria here for looking at membership changes to enterprise admins, and I even have one to look at if who it's changed by. So if it's changed by my automation account, I'm assuming that's an allowed process. So I won't act on this change. But if anything other than the automation account changes the membership, it's going to treat it as an unauthorized change. It's going to mark it. It could send an email, and it's going to automatically revert that change. So again, very powerful capabilities. Plus the reporting, the reports list is extensive. I haven't added a lot in here since I just recently set this up, but you can see there's a lot of report templates here, including these various ones like PCI, HIPAA, SOX that are added in here as well. So that is, and it has role-based access here as well, which is another nice capability. The one thing I wanted to also show, just to give you guys an idea of the recovery capability, if I'm in a disaster scenario with Active Directory, and I have Active Directory Force Recovery already in place, my ability to recover my environment changes from all those steps, that up to 28 steps that I showed you on that one slide, where you got to mount a backup and do all the cleanup and do all the manual recovery steps, to just a few clicks. So I'm not going to go, and usually I go in and destroy my AD, but for the sake of time, I'm going to skip that. But assume my AD is messed up. I'm in the recovery console. I click Force Recovery. I pick a backup that's fairly recent, and I see all these DCs here. I'm going to be able to recover all 4 of these DCs by clicking Continue. It gives me a warning because I'm laying it down over the same server, which is fine. And I start this recovery. In that many clicks, 5 or 6 clicks, I've just started a simultaneous recovery of AD. And this is, again, an AD-specific solution. This is AD-specific technology in mind versus a general backup, where I'd have to go through a lot of extra steps to do what's called an authoritative restore. The time it takes to do this versus that full recovery, I'd probably still be mounting my backup on a domain controller to do my disaster recovery steps before I even got to this part. And then the time, this is going to probably take about 3 minutes or 4 minutes. And this is I think this is a couple thousand users, but it's, again, very easy to run this. So that's the gist of what I wanted to cover. And going back to, I don't know if anybody has any questions they want to ask specific to our products or services, our breach preparedness, our breach response, migration, any of that stuff.
We have one question,
Sure.
which is, can pause in between or need to suspend and return?
What was it?
That's
Sorry,
what Tony said. He said, can pause in between or need to suspend and return. Let me see whether there's something below. No, that's all. Tony, can you add something there? Or Rob, do you understand what he meant?
I'm not sure I understand that.
He said, can pause in between or need to suspend and rerun.
Can you pause in between a recovery? I'm not sure what the context is.
Recovery, during the recovery process just now.
Can you pause the recovery? So there
and
isn't
rerun.
There's not really an ability to pause here. It assumes if you're doing a recovery and it's a disaster or a lab scenario or whatever, you're not pausing this. So it's a complete force recovery. If we compare to a competitive product out there, they do some stuff a little differently. But we're really the only solution that you can just spin this thing up and do a full force recovery without creating a plan for how the recovery is going to go. As you saw, that's all I did. I didn't create any plan. I just basically clicked in, selected a backup, and did a recovery.
So the answer is you cannot pause. You have to.
You can suspend this. You can use the suspend button here. It just continues from where it left off, though. I don't know why you'd want to pause. I would actually probably need, it would be better for me to have a specific use case for that. I don't know why you'd want to pause unless you started a recovery and realized something's wrong.
Yeah, he said Tony asked also any indicator to show how long it take on the process, how long it take on the process. I presume how long
Well,
it will take.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm assuming you're talking about the backup or the recovery process.
yeah, I
So
think
when
so.
I'm looking at this recovery, whoops, I'm going to do the split view. I have this timeline over here, or this general timeline here, a high level view of things. I've got the log here, which gives me how long it's going to take. So if I had a production environment, let's say again, say I've got 200 DCs and I only need to recover 5 of them to test a recovery in a lab. I could spin up ADFR in the lab, copy the data over very easily. It's very portable, and do a recovery in a lab environment, see what the start time is and what the end time is, and then I could extrapolate that out across the other DCs because everything's done in parallel. It's not doing one DC at a time. So I will get a start and end time, plus it shows the elapsed time for the completion of this process.
Tony, does that answer your question? Your
And
questions?
if the
Yeah.
question was really how long does this take for a
Yes.
customer, then you can't really answer that because every customer's got different data. The sysvol could have a lot of junk on it. The database sizes could be different. They could have a lot of bloated accounts from things being added to the user profiles. So it's hard to say. But I will give you an example from a really well-known retailer. I think it's the largest retailer in the world. I don't know if Ben will have to let me know if I can actually say the name, but this largest retailer had their recovery time at about 6 days using their own processes. When we brought our product in, got that process down to 6 hours. That's over 2 million identities and a lot of domain controllers. If I recall correctly, there's 500 DCs in total in that environment. So it's
Yeah.
a exponential reduction in the total recovery time, but every environment's different. My environment, I've got a lab with 10,500 users in it, but the users don't have a lot of junk on the profile. So it just takes going from 2,000 to 10,000 only took me about 2 extra minutes. So again, depends on the size.
All right. So Tony said, yes, you answered his question,
Oh,
and he
cool.
said, thank you.
Yep.
So I think as we don't have any other questions anymore, I think we are at the end. Rob,
Okay.
as usual, fantastic. I like it. And as said, please reach out to me if you have further questions. And in any case, tomorrow or Monday, I will send you the recording and the slide deck, and then we can take it from there. And don't forget, we can do the Purple Night also for you free of charge.
Yeah, and
Okay,
I
thank
appreciate
you.
you inviting us and letting us present. Thank you.
Yeah, it's fun. It's always fun with you, Rob. And Ben said nothing today. Okay, thank you very much. I will close it now, and we take it from there. Have a nice rest of the afternoon and the end of the week and weekend.
All
Thank
right. Thank you
you.
very much.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.